Story 1. The relentless pursuit of franchise building over standalone storytelling. It seems like every new film has to be the launching pad for a sequel, a spin-off, or a multi-movie arc, which chips away at the integrity of the story. There's a constant push to set up the next thing, and it's at the expense of the current narrative. Studios are so fixated on establishing universes that they forget to ensure that the individual film is satisfying on its own. This forward-looking approach often leaves the audience with more teasers for future content than a well-crafted, self-contained story that resonates on its own merit. Story 2. I don't know how to describe it exactly, but lately, I have been seeing a lot more movies where the only way to really describe the structure is stuff happens. Like, I don't feel like I'm experiencing a story, more a train of thought. Story 3. Oh, I could write a novel on this. The short answer is loss of maturity in the storytelling, loss of real or perceived audience attention spans, frenetic and jumpy cinematography and editing, a move away from character development, a decline in ambitious cinematography and scene blocking, lack of clear thematic focal points, the absence of good lighting, and the overloading of soundscapes. Story 4. The streaming boom has caused significantly declining theater revenue, so studios have to create large, crowd-pleasing spectacle movies that take virtually no risks. Because of this, you see many sequels, remakes, and option properties that have already seen success and have audience familiarity but are very unoriginal. Studio executives are, justifiably, afraid they won't make any money back by doing small, original, or risky art house films, so they basically don't get made anymore. Additionally, special effects used to be done by a small number of expensive, high-production value shops, Industrial Light and Magic being the most renowned, that would handle the effects for an entire movie. The art direction would be consistent, and the assets, such as models and textures, would be shared, so all the shots would have a consistent look and a high level of polish. Now studios bid out shots or sequences to smaller, independent special effects houses to the lowest bidder. The bids are kept low by minimizing labor and rushing, and many studios underbid and end up losing money. Often, things are done last minute, and coordination is poor between all the different contractors working on the movie, so things will look good in some shots and terrible in others. All of this is to make it cheap, so despite massive innovation in computer graphics, movies today look notably worse. The artists are capable of much more and are well aware of this, and they hate it at least as much as audiences do. The big special effects studios have essentially been reduced to shells of their former selves, and much of the labor has been outsourced overseas, because cost is now the priority. Story 5. I look back at some old movies with giant, real sets, and it's absolutely beautiful to look at. Movies where talented artists make puppets of monsters that look real and can actually interact with their human counterparts. Physical armor crafted by skilled workers. When I see a behind-the-scenes clip and the whole entire stage is green and actors are being motion captured, it's like, just make a video game at that point, not a movie. Story 6. Lack of risk. Most films nowadays are too perfectly suited to what the public finds comfortable, but we need something consistent to shake that up. Not only is there a lack of risk in terms of plot and theme, but films visually have looked almost the same for the last 2 decades. Story 7. There's no sense of subtlety or deeper meaning. It's all laid out, and the jokes or references are explained by the damn characters. They treat the audience like toddlers. Story 8. The same witty, ironic, self-aware writing and dialogue style that spread like a virus ever since the Marvel Cinematic Universe took off. You can't have a single genuine character moment without some stupid joke or one-liner derailing it, and characters talk like they don't care about the story they're in. Story 9. For me, it's remakes of old successful titles done in a poor format or with a gender-bent version of the character. We need to stop and move past the movies of our youth. I'm a millennial. The idea that we'll love to see an updated, highly computer-generated version of something we loved as a kid, it's just not working and it's overdone. Story 10. Most movies are so dark you simply can't see. I don't get it. Is lighting expensive? Is color adjusting expensive? Is it a cost-cutting thing? I refuse to believe that it's an intentional choice to make everything so dark you just can't see. Story 11. Shooting a film without a finalized script. The final product has a muddled story, and because the story keeps getting rewritten and scenes are res hot, The visual effects look horrible because entire segments have to be redone. Story 12. Greed. Lack of risk-taking among the studio heads. They do not invest in projects with budgets under $20 million. It is either $20 million or $300 million, with no in-between. It has left no room for risk-taking and innovation. With the exception of A24, every studio is putting out projects that have not changed their formula since the 1990s. It is embarrassing. Story 13. Everyone blames studio executives for bad decisions. Story decisions, budget issues, marketing, etc. And once upon a time, they were actually the reason for them. But in the 2008 financial crisis, hedge funds bought up huge chunks of studio ownership. Now the studio executives are beholden to those hedge funds, whose only motive is line go up. Studio executives at least got into this business to make movies in some capacity. Hedge funds only exist to make money. Legally, if you have shareholders, you are required to do what makes them the most money, even if it's ethically or morally dubious. Every time a movie is focus tested to death, every time a visual effects studio goes under due to slashed budgets, every time directors change halfway through filming, every time a script is written by 5 different people, every time unions are undermined and lives are destroyed, mine included, you can thank the hedge funds. And David Zaslav, he's a douche. Story 14. Real bad special effects and visual effects. Really poor set design and costume design. Green screening entire sets. Acting in a room with nothing. We'll handle it in post. All these things lead to a fake feeling and inauthentic movie. They don't try to capture scenes within the lens anymore. As well as forced diversity casting. Overinflated budgets. Criticizing fans and telling us we're stupid, racist, and don't know better. Edit. Honestly, go watch Gladiator 2 first, then go watch Gladiator. Really great contrast between modern filmmaking and today's practices. Story 15. Self-referential, cynical, mocking attitudes seem to permeate current movies. Thomas Flight on YouTube has an in-depth video about it. Story 16. The lack of imagination. They keep making a second film that no one asked for, and it only runs off the success of the first. Or they remake a classic and absolutely ruin it. Story 17. I have seen the downgrade of animated children's movies. All of them nowadays are too fast-paced and rushed, or the complete opposite, where the sequel is completely separated from the storyline and goes on about irrelevant topics that make absolutely no sense to the storyline. Not to mention the live actions being made of every single film out there, kind of just ruining the story too. Story 18. 3-hour movies. Some of the big blockbusters feel like they go on forever at the expense of a clean story. Great movies 20 years ago were all about 90 minutes. Story 19. Bad writing or changing writers. Lack of overview for film franchises. Actors who do not know the source material, like the actress in Madam Web. Bad or rushed computer-generated imagery. Setting up shared universes. Why does everyone have to do this? Remakes and reboots. Too many superhero films. Multiverse or timeline resets. Unnecessary sequels. Having films with rogues galleries without the hero. Story 20. Reboots and remakes. When I'm nostalgic for that movie I really loved as a kid, I'll watch that movie I really loved as a kid. It's still on film and streaming and YouTube, and I can rent a digital copy. I don't need a modern take, or the same movie with a different gendered antagonist or a live-action version. Just stop. Story 21. Reshoots and trying to find the movie in post. A lot of big franchise films are guilty of this, but it is super apparent with Disney. It feels like they do not even have a clear idea of what the plot is going to be until they have already shot or animated half of it, and then they are stuck working around the scenes they have. Plus, it inflates budgets to an absurd degree. Story 22. Poor sound mixing. The dialogue sounds like this, but then the music and sound effects sound like this. So, you either blow out your eardrums or keep subtitles on so you can understand what they're saying. Also, way too much pathos. Just let your dramatic moments be. Not every moment has to be diffused immediately. Marvel popularized this, and the effects haven't stopped in a lot of mainstream works. Story 23. Lack of lighting. But it's been ruining movies for years now. Give me light. Give me color. Everything is so drab and hard to see. Barbie sure was a nice change of pace. Story 24. End credits containing important information. It used to be a fun Easter egg hint for the next thing, but now you have to sit through credits to find out. Actually, they didn't have a happy ending, and we hope you watch this before the next film because we're going to pick up after this cliffhanger that we buried after the actual plot. Put it in the main part. That's too important to hide back there. Story 25. Too many sequels, spin-offs, remakes, reboots, and rehashing old plots, and not enough originality or bravery to try new ideas. Successful franchises are safe, so most big-budget studios would rather make 8 sequels to a single box office hit that came out 20 years ago than try 8 fresh new ideas. Most movies seem stale these days because they are formulaic and driven by profits, not creativity. Story 26. The remakes of movies. Just leave what was good alone and find another idea. I refuse to watch the new Disney remakes. I know they will never stand up to the classics. Also, leave politics and societal issues out of it. Story 27. As a millennial who only recently started watching the Alien franchise, I know, and also watched Dawn of the Dead for the first time, I was blown away by the differences between those and recent modern-day films. It was like night and day. They weren't perfect movies, but not once did I feel like they thought I was stupid. There was no overt explanation of plot points, no generic character stereotypes, no need to show me every single thing that happened with the assumption that I'm incapable of connecting A to B. Foreshadowing paid off without being a condescending slap in the face. The casts were likable. They felt like stories that the directors wanted to tell. It had been so long since I saw practical effects in a movie rather than fake-looking computer-generated imagery that I was actually a little shook by some of the gore in Dawn of the Dead, because damn, that actually looked pretty good for that time period. So overall, I might just sum it up as lack of effort these days, or laziness, or whatever makes so many, but not all, modern movies into these cookie-cutter dime-a-dozen Mad Lib-style templates designed to ride trends and maximize profit rather than portray a vision that the director has. Story 28. Over-explaining. Directors started believing that unless a character looks at the camera and states what's happening or what he is thinking, the viewers won't get it. Favoring big, spectacular scenes over meaningful, emotional scenes. We are in the era of cardboard plots and huge explosions. Casting checklists. More and more directors are hiring writers, casting actors, and voice actors based on representation, instead of focusing on who is the best fit for the role. This results in lousy plots, wooden acting, and flavorless dialogues. Story 29. Everything about the Wheel of Time TV series. The author literally has 6,000 named characters in the books, and instead, they make up new ones, change the story completely, and exaggerate what doesn't need to be exaggerated. Story 30. Computer game syndrome. The hero does something and there are 0 consequences once they've left that location. For example, they have a massive gunfight, complete with explosions and destroyed buildings, in a major town. Then they drive off and it's never referred to again. In reality, the police, Federal Bureau of Investigation, counterterrorism units would be pursuing them forever. Sometimes it's even sillier. They leave a room after killing a couple of enemies and the remaining people do not follow them. Story 31. Remakes of everything and a movie about every comic book character. Stop it. Please stop it. No one gives a single thought about Kraven the Hunter. You don't need to remake Mean Girls. Just stop. Story 32. Cookie-cutter slop with an arc that's overused, obvious, and unoriginal, with a top actor to appease the box office. Comedian Rich Hall does a great skit with the beginning of Tom Cruise's career. A guy does a job, does it pretty well too. Then he has a crisis of confidence and he can't do his job anymore. Meets a pretty lady who boosts his confidence. Then he's back on top again. Every movie from Tom Cruise was like that until he broke the mold. Story 33. Some big actor who's not good at acting but has a popular name like Dwayne Johnson or Kevin Hart is in the movie and is the only highlight. However, the overall movie is poor. Story 34. 90% of new movies are just a copy of a copy or a prequel or a sequel of something that was already remade a few times. Original stories are few and far between, and even then, most are not told well. Story 35. Volume and darkness. Music or explosions so loud you can't hear words spoken, or scenes so dark you can't see what is going on at all. They are messing up the balance so much that it's a constant up and down with the volume knob if you have a home theater and you don't want to go deaf. Story 36. I'm actually hard-pressed to remember a recent movie that has made a real impact that wasn't based on a book or other source material first. Yes, Dune is amazing, and that movie Moon with Sam Rockwell came out 15 years ago. There was a time in the 1990s and 2000s when companies weren't afraid of experimentation and relied less on everything being part of a universe or existing intellectual property. Movies didn't need to be blockbuster hits to be successful. Think of movies like A Waking Life, Before Sunrise, Dead Man, or Rounders. The story came first, and even if the stakes were small, they always felt real. Production companies are so risk-averse now that they're making poor-quality movies with recognizable intellectual property as a bait and switch. As long as everyone sees it on opening day, nobody cares if it's a good movie, and I feel like Sony has monetized the hate-watch experience. As with all degradation, I think it comes from the shift in audience. Capitalism has shifted from consumer-based to investor-based. So the impetus behind making a movie is no longer what if we blew every 18 to 45-year-old's mind with this movie about aliens or the Wild West or whatever. It's what if we made our investors more money than anything while debasing ourselves and our craft in front of an audience who hates us for it? This capitalism, late-stage capitalism, is ruining everything.